In 2023, Valorant Esports enters its first year of franchising. 10 organisations each from Europe, Asia and the Americas have been chosen to represent Valorant at the highest level. They've been selected based on their fanbase, finances and general conduct as an org, with things like the treatment of players and content they've produced. Orgs that Riot Games think will be reliable and will grow the general Valorant fanbase in the coming years. With league splits for each region and consistent international events, this new system will allow us to watch top-level Valorant from across the globe, week in and week out. And over these past few months, the orgs have been building teams to compete in these international leagues. Some have stayed the same as last year and others have been freshly built from the ground up. For the players who make it onto one of the franchise teams, they'll have a consistent salary, perfect practice environment and weekly LAN experience. And for the orgs who make it in, they'll get huge exposure through being one of the leading names in Valorant forever, as there's no relegation. But what about those who don't? With only 30 franchising slots for the entire world, there's countless orgs and players who didn't secure a spot in any of the international leagues. They weren't just random teams though, even orgs like Optic, who were the best team of 2022, didn't make it in. Their players have gone to teams who did, of course, but it's a shame that we don't get to keep the same storylines from the previous years of Valorant. So, is that it? If a team didn't get in, should they just give up on Valorant? No. Riot Games knew that if there wasn't any incentive to stay in Valorant for anyone else, it would eventually result in the complete collapse of the system. If no tier 2 scene exists, the flow of new players and teams is cut off, and over time, that means the Valorant being played at the top level gets worse and worse, and yeah, it would die. Take Overwatch as an example, which, despite having a huge main league, is now suffering the consequences of a poorly structured tier 2 system. Riot knew that though, and so have created massive plans for Valorant's tier 2, which they've coined as Ascension. This video will go over the entire format, along with teams to look out for and who I think will win it all. But first, what even is it? Ascension is Valorant Esports' way for tier 2 teams to make it directly into the franchising system, providing the players with a chance to prove themselves and a genuine reason for orgs to invest in Valorant even if they didn't get invited to the international leagues originally. Before all the details were revealed about Ascension, people thought that there would be no real link between it and the main leagues, similar to Overwatch Contenders where the only point is to prove yourself as a player to then be picked up by an org that's already in franchising. That's not the case here though. You're actually playing for something much more significant, your own slot in the franchise league. The confusion around this tier 2 system stemmed from the announcement that there would be no relegation for the orgs already in franchising. You might wonder, with no relegation, how can new teams join from the Ascension? Well, by simply making the leagues bigger. If your team wins the Ascension tournament for your major region, you will be added to that international league for a span of 2 years, receiving the same benefits as the chosen partner teams, playing on LAN every week and going to global events. See, the leagues start with 10 teams each, but with this Ascension promotion system, that will reach a maximum of 14, giving us 42 top-level Valorant teams in every corner of the world. Exciting, right? But before we get there, we need to take a step back. Ascension isn't just one massive tournament or a simple league split system. There's a pretty unique format with differences between each region. And when I say regions, I don't mean the main 3. In the Ascension system, the Americas is split into 4 leagues: NA, Brazil, and LATAM North and South. EMEA is split 9 different ways and Asia 10. This ensures most countries have an equal chance to fight for the spot in franchising, and at the end of the year, the best teams from all of these will come together, but not until later on. First, they have to conquer their own territory in 2 seasons of Challengers League play. There are 2 ways to qualify for the regular season of Challengers. Those are Open Qualifiers and Invitations. The Open Qualifiers are pretty self-explanatory. Teams fight through a double elimination bracket, and the best of those will go through into the league. In most regions, there's only 1 open qualifier, but for some, like North America, there's 2, with the second being a last chance, similar to the tournaments we saw in the main VCT last year. The second route to qualifying is being directly invited to the league. Invites will go to the most prominent tier 2 orgs in the region. Examples would be The Guard in NA, Focus in Northern Europe, and Damwon in Korea. This ensures that teams we know are consistently good don't get flukily knocked out of an open qualifier, and then barred from any VCT events for the majority of the year. The regular season for each Challengers League is made from a mix of teams from the open qualifiers and invitations. The exact numbers of each are different in each region. Oceania only has open qualifier teams, whereas the Dark region is 100% invites. On average, it's about half and half, like in NA, which has 6 each to make a 12-team league. Once the teams have been decided, the first of 2 league splits will commence. The teams play each other for about 6 weeks or so, and then take a break before doing it again. and during this break, most leagues have another open qualifier just to refresh the teams and keep it as competitive as possible. There was questioning over the format in the NA League here though, because they don't have another open qualifier between splits, instead a mid-season invitational, which gives the teams from Split 1 a chance to earn more points for some reason. This also means that if a team doesn't make it in now, they're out for the entire year in NA, which isn't fun. But anyway, over the course of these two splits, teams earn points that get tallied up over the year. It's a similar system that was used in the main VCT previously, where if you rack up enough points, you get a spot in Champions. The difference is, of course, that you're not trying to get to Champions here. Instead, you're aiming for the final Challengers Playoffs. Challengers Playoffs is the final tournament of the year within these separate regions. The teams with the highest amount of circuit points will get placed into a final double elimination bracket, similar to the LCQ format at the end of 2022. In Asia and Europe, it will be the single winner of this bracket that finally gets the chance to take the spot in franchising. As there's only 4 America's Challengers Leagues, in NA 2 teams will make it out, and in the South American tournaments the numbers will probably be similar. But what do they qualify for? The final end-of-year qualify to franchising full region-wide Ascension tournament. That's of course not the official name, but that's basically what it is. The 3 Ascension tournaments take the top teams from the Challengers playoffs of all the separate regions and pits them against each other to find the best in that major region. Confusing sentence, I know, but it's basically the final Tier 2 tournament for the whole of the Americas, the whole of Europe, and the whole of Asia. Win this, and you've done it. You've finally got a spot in franchising, and everything that comes with it, including the opportunity to compete at international events. That means we could see teams come all the way from a Tier 2 open qualifier to winning champions within 2 years. Longer than last year, but still impressive in a franchise system. These Ascension tournaments will be on LAN, and should be a really exciting way to end the Tier 2 system for the year before Champions. In terms of possible locations, it's been hinted that they'll be in more obscure cities in a tweet by Riot Jaco, the head of VCT Pacific. Bodork asks, I wonder where each region's Ascension tournament will be hosted at. EMEA could be in Malmo, America, New York or Vegas, and Pacific maybe Singapore. Who knows, but I hope it's somewhere unique. And Jacob replies with, it will be somewhere exciting. I can't wait for this Ascension tournament, and honestly, I think it might be more hype than even some of the global events next year. We'll have to wait and see. But before I end this video, I wanted to go over my picks to win Ascension, and give you some teams to watch out for going into 2023. In the Americas, my top pick would be The Guard. They've kept 4 of their players heading into next year, and we already know that they have the potential to dominate North American Valorant like they did at the start of last year. It'll of course all depend on whether they can replicate those performances again, but as a Guard mega fan, I sure do hope so. I promise I'm not biased. Other teams to take note of in NA would be M80, a new org that have picked up the old Ghost Core, along with promising NA players Xander and EU. G2 looks strong also, signing Shazam, Dapper, Penny, Whippy and Oxy, and apparently dominating scrims against C9, so we'll see how that turns out. I haven't forgotten about Brazil and LATAM though. Vivo Keyed have been a strong Brazilian team for a while, and despite losing literally their entire roster, they've returned with a really solid team for Ascension, led by duelist players Polo and Liazzi. In LATAM, teams like Fusion and 9Z look to make a stand for their region, but we're still waiting on the announcement of their final players. In EMEA, there are so many teams that it's hard to pick just one to win it all. In the end, I decided on Focus. They just looked so good against Cloud9 in the Red Bull home ground, and that was with a sub, by the way, that I could definitely see them taking Ascension. There's so many other interesting teams across Europe though. Turkey has some powerhouses like SMB, the Istanbul Wildcats who have SSK7 and Bravaf from the CIS region, and of course my boy Woot on Fireflux. And in the Polaris League, Apex Valorant have supposedly agreed to sign Enzo, Mystic and Magnum, 3 former Fnatic players, and if they complement those with 2 more players of the same caliber, they definitely have a shot at the trophy. The final dark horse team for me is Team Queso in the Spanish League, just keep them in the back of your minds. And finally we come to the Pacific region. The most obvious team to pick as a favourite is probably Bleed from APAC. They were already top 3 in APAC in 2022, but have now signed Scary, who's probably one of the best controller players in Asia, and it's hard not to rate them. Boom are another APAC team with a real chance of winning Ascension, and it honestly could come down to a head-to-head between these two teams. I think some of the Korean teams could rival them though, including Damwon Kia, especially with their new pickup of Sylvan from WGS. Personally, I would love to see an Australian or New Zealand team make it through, as they don't have a team in the franchising system already, but we'll have to wait and see. Chinese Valorant also has a strong chance to win, but I haven't mentioned them here as it's pretty likely they'll be invited into the franchise league, or at least the international events with the recent approval of Valorant in China. But if that's not the case, look out for EDG, who we saw at last year's champs, or FPX with their new Chinese roster. And so that was my guide to Valorant's Ascension format. If you have any more questions or thoughts on the teams in Tier 2, let me know down in the comments below. Please do subscribe if you learned something or just enjoyed the video, it really helps me out. I've been Commend, and thanks for watching.